So here is a book fresh from Japan, Casual Men's Clothes by pattern maker Toshio Kaneko. And I bought it from a Japanese seller on Etsy. When all was said and done, it cost me about 30 euros with taxes and postage. And what it contains patterns for men's casual clothes. We've got 15 different patterns ranging from tops, bottoms, outerwear and accessories, as long as some helpful little lessons that we'll take a look at. And here is some of the clothes looking nice and aesthetic. So I've got these nice pictures of the different clothes. Here's a shirt with a nice fancy collar. Here's a shirt with an even fancier collar. Here is a short sleeve shirt. I made this one, so might show you that later. And some various shirts, and it goes on, t-shirts, trousers. But let's look at these lessons. So the first lesson is all about how to make a shirt. Goes through all the various steps nice and clearly with these detailed photographs and some information in Japanese, which for some people might not be so helpful. It's not very helpful for me because I can't speak Japanese and I can't even read it. So yeah, it looks here nice and detailed. And then the second lesson is all about how to make a fly in a pair of trousers. Third lesson talks about buttonholes. And then there's some information here about sizing and how you can adapt the patterns to your own measurements. Looks kind of useful and very detailed. And then lastly, there's some information about basic sewing. Yeah, it looks interesting. It's a shame I have no idea what it's saying, but anyway. And then come on to the meat of it, the how to make section. So the first thing you need to do when you decide to make any of these things in this book is to cut out the pattern pieces. And the pattern pieces are in the back and the front of the book, printed on these sheets of paper. You need to cut them out. I've already done that at the front, but here's one at the back. And when you cut them out, you get a huge sheet like this. It is double-sided, and it looks like an insane tangle of lines and marks, and that's because it is. And at first glance, it's pretty intimidating. So each sheet contains the pattern for 2 garments. This one has number 5 and number 6 on it. So what you need to do here is you need to trace out the patterns using tracing paper or whatever else you like in your size. And the pattern sheet has all the pattern pieces that you need for your garment printed on it, but they are without seam allowances. So what you have to do is you have to take some tracing paper or something like that, like here. Then you have to trace around the pieces and cut them out. So this tracing process I find pretty laborious. It takes a long time. Now, in the how to make section, in this area, it tells you for each pattern piece how much seam allowance to include in these circled these circled numbers. So here on the bottom and the hem of the pant leg, you should have 5.4 centimeters seam allowance, but on the top you should only have 1.3 centimeters seam allowance. It's a bit confusing. You can either choose to add that seam allowance directly onto your traced pattern pieces, or do it later when you cut out your fabric, but make sure not to forget to add the seam allowance somewhere. Once you have all your pieces cut out, it's time to get on to sewing the thing. So for each garment, there are pre-detailed instructions. Even if you don't speak Japanese, you can kind of get the idea of how it goes. Sometimes it's a bit confusing and you need to really study the diagrams and everything, but overall, it's not so bad. Now, there are a few tips and tricks to help you. So if you go on your phone, open up Google Translate, get it from Japanese to English, or whatever other language you want, and then you can use the camera to translate directly what's written in the book. So sometimes it works better than others. So we can see here is the information about the completed size of the trousers. So we've got the waist measurements, the hip measurements, and total length for each of the sizes, small, medium, large, etc. So that's really helpful. So as promised, here is the short sleeve shirt I made. I think it's pattern number 2 or 3. I made it in size small. Overall, I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Just the collar, I didn't like this kind of great big fat pointy collar, so I made a circular one instead. I think it's a bit more subtle. But yeah, there it is. So overall, I think this book is pretty cool. I'd really recommend it. It's a bit more difficult, of course, because of the language barrier to traditional sewing patterns. But that being said, it's also a lot cheaper, much better value for money. For only something like 30 euros, you get 16 different patterns, where normally one pattern will cost you 20 or 15. You do have to pay for that slightly with the old tracing paper, but you do have to pay for that slightly in the fact that you have to trace the whole pattern out on paper again. It's a bit difficult. Yeah, there we go. Hopefully you find that useful.